The third is with Thomas, verses 24 through 29. Now, so far, the verses that we've read, there's been several times where, like Mary said, I do not know where they put him. I don't know where he is. She did not know it was Jesus. He comes into the upper room. They did not know it was him until they saw the nail scars in his hands and his side and the whole thing. And then when they saw that, they saw it was Jesus. They didn't know him. It goes on and on and on about they didn't know him, they didn't know where. If you think back to the Last Supper, do you remember when Jesus says, you know where I'm going and you know the way? Do you remember which one it was that speaks up and says, we don't know? It was Thomas. It was Thomas. This idea of not knowing is going on in John 20. Where did we end up having a meal that we shouldn't have eaten at? A tree of knowing. You see, John's not backing off the fact, I don't know. He's going, good. That's really good. You don't know. Because the more we hunger and thirst for that kind of knowing, the more problems we're probably going to have. Because we're not going to be given all the answers. I don't know why a dear brother at 59 years old has gone on to be with the Lord, quintuple bypass. I don't know. What I do believe, to the point of knowing, because when you believe, then you can know. I believe that he's with the Lord. So the faith in that produces a knowledge of the Lord, that I have the faith and I have the knowledge both. What we're going to see with Thomas is that he exemplifies this thing of knowing and brings into reality. Jesus ends up bringing in the reality of faith with Thomas. Just read verses 24 and 25 of John 20.
One of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the Twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he replied, "I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side."
Yeah, that's a really nice way of saying, you know what? I'm not believing anything. I'm not going to walk by faith. I'm not going to do this thing by faith. The way I operate is I have to see it, I have to touch it, put my hand in the whole thing. Now, I'm not picking on Thomas because I think that's where we live most of the time. As long as we can see it, touch it, smell it, as long as we've got the evidence, then I can believe something. And it's like, well, but that's not really the way the kingdom works. The kingdom works the other way around. By faith, we understand. Faith comes first, then the knowledge and the understanding. It's completely backwards. Thomas represents something very, very important where he says, basically, I won't believe until I know. And this is what I need to do to know in order to believe. And he makes it quite clear. Verses 26 through 29, you might call it the scientific method, by the way. That's what scientists do. They deal with what you can measure, what you can see, what you can touch. That's what they deal with. And then they come up with their truths, not the other way around. So, you might call Thomas a type of a scientist, if you would, in some respects. He's dealing with the physical. Verses 26 through 29.
8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. "Peace be with you," he said. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe." "My Lord and my God," Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, "You believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me."
Again, not a big Bible study, just a simple thing. How many days later was it?
8.
Now, a lot of people have taken that to say, okay, so that's establishing a pattern for how we're supposed to come together, as the church, and then Jesus in our corporate gatherings is there with us, this kind of thing. I mean, I could run with that. I don't, whatever you want to, that's fine. God bless you. Hallelujah. Let's get on with it. I don't particularly believe that. I think that the disciples were together all the time at that point, especially after Easter, that they were together all the time. And so we've got the 8th day. 8 days later from the time that Thomas wasn't with them, and they told him about what had happened, and he makes the statement. I guess what I want to say is that it was 8 days later. So Thomas, I don't know where he was for 8 days. I just know that it's 8 days later and he's with them. I don't know how many of us in this room, I don't know how many people, spend 8 days waiting for the Lord to reveal something or himself. 8 days. I mean, we spend a few minutes in our prayer closet. We pray Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then whatever. It's 8 days later. See, when I see Thomas, I don't see him as I think a lot of people do. I don't see him as a doubting Thomas and all that kind of stuff at all. I see Thomas, and what I see as a Thomas, I mean, I think if it was 20 days later, if it was 3 months later, 6 months later, I think we'd be reading about Thomas saying, I want to know. I want to know. I really want to know. It's 8 days later, Jesus appears. The first P we said was passion in prayer. Don't cling to the old was the key. The second P had to do with peace. And the key is, as the Father sent me, forgiving, merciful, understanding in all these situations, bringing peace. As the Father sent me, I send you. Forgiving. Forgiving's at the heart of all of that. Talk to psychologists, well, Christian psychologists anyway, I think for the most part. They will tell you that the key to most of the problems that they run into with people is where something has happened and they won't let go of it. They just won't. They're like a dog with a bone. It's killing them, and they won't let go of it. Just like Jesus said, if you retain the sin, what does sin do? What's the wages of sin? Death. If you retain somebody's sin in your life, it'll kill you. You can go to the bank on it. It's very, very powerful spiritual truth. The third P here is pursuing. I see Thomas as one who is pursuing. He really, really, really wants to believe. He really does. And he's going to pursue the truth. It's 8 days later and he's pursuing. The thing is, for Thomas, his way for coming to faith is by the scientific method, by touching in the whole thing. You notice in the text, Jesus invites him in and says, go ahead, if you want to exercise the scientific method, go ahead. Touch me, stick your hand in, do what you got to do. And he doesn't do that. He lets go of the old way of coming to knowledge by the scientific method and says, my Lord and my God. All of a sudden he believes. And Jesus says, that's great. You know, you've seen and now you believe. But the way the kingdom works, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe, who exercise faith and then they see. The entire book of John, all of his miracles, people exercise faith. Go do this. They do it and they're healed. If you study every miracle, there's always an exercise of faith and then they come to know, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God, kind of thing. And now Thomas engages in that. So Thomas, the P is pursuing. But the key for Thomas is to get rid of his old ways. This is the way we always did it. And you can continue to do that. And you'll end up in the same old place. Or you can let go of the old ways, which is what you're in a journey of right now, really, is discovering newness. New ways, new thoughts. New people, the whole thing. And you're going to have to not totally abandon the past, but let it stay in the past so you can get, because you can't do both. If you keep one hand in the past and one hand in the future, don't be surprised when people are driving nails and you're going nowhere. Anyway, by faith we understand. Thomas represents that. that he shows us the way forward. And the fourth scene, the fourth situations in John 21, it's a long chapter, we won't, read it. But let's just read a couple of verses. Mike, do you have it there?
Mm-hmm.
In John 21, would you read verse 3, then drop down to 19, and then drop to 22? So verses 3, 19, and 22.
Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we are going fishing with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat.
And then down to 19.
This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me.
So that's after Jesus has been talking to Peter for a while. Tells him what kind of a death he's going to die, and then he says, follow me. Verse 22.
Jesus said to him, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to do to you? You follow me.
So again, follow me. So what you've got is Peter in the beginning of the chapter, I'm going fishing. By the end of the chapter, twice, Jesus is saying, follow me. Follow me.
The New Living Translation says when they go fishing, they caught nothing.
Yeah, exactly. They were out all night long and they caught nothing. Which is, again, another very powerful, I'm going to do this. Waste of time, but go ahead if you've got to do it that way. Like I said, the whole chapter, it's just with so many spiritual truths in it. Something I had said months ago, a year ago maybe, that really encouraged Mary. Something she never thought about. When they go fishing, that place where they're fishing, the Sea of Tiberias, is 60 miles from Jerusalem, which is like, okay, so, well, Jesus told them to stay in Jerusalem. They didn't just wander outside of town for a couple miles so they could be back by nightfall. They were 60 miles from where Jesus said, stay here, don't move. And Peter leads them 60 miles away. And they get there, and who's on the seashore? Jesus. I really could get very upset about a lot of the church teaching over the years. Oh boy, you're in trouble. No, he's right there. In fact, he was waiting there for them. Lest we think, he's so against us and the whole thing. He's waiting there, he's making breakfast. Jesus is wonderful. You can see why it's easy to get passionate about him. Because even when Steve Cerone is out where he shouldn't be, fishing on the wrong side of the boat, Jesus is just saying, yeah, I know. How you doing out there? Not so good. I know. Why don't you try throwing your net on the other side? They do, and they catch a huge catch. It's just a beautiful story. Anyway, the whole thing about it being corporate, it has to do with Peter, but they're all there in the whole thing. And I'm just going to wind it up here. I was going to talk about the fact that Peter, it says that he puts on his garment when he jumps in and starts to swim to shore. And as we have this passion for Jesus and we know peace and we're pursuing the way, the truth, and the life, remember Thomas, we don't know. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And Thomas is like, okay, I can pursue the way, the truth, and the life every day in my life. That's something that I can pursue. I can walk out and live out every day the way, the truth, and the life. We've got this last P that I use the word perfect. And I don't mean to imply that perfect, like you do everything right. That's not what I mean. What I mean is kind of like when you're polishing, if you've ever polished anything, you're polishing it to make it shinier. as long as, let's call it a vase, as long as the vase stays still, the polisher can continue to polish it. But if the vase is moving all over the place, it's hard to polish it. Come here, you little vase, kind of thing. It's a bit like that. As long as we continue in the pursuit, Jesus says, follow me. And as long as we follow him, it's like he has the opportunity to polish us and make us totally into what we were designed to become in our lives. Every time we decide, well, I'm going to go fishing, then it's like, okay, well, you can do that, but I can't really get at you to polish you. You're not being perfected. Remember, in Matthew 5, Jesus talks about being perfected, being like our Heavenly Father who loves those, to love our enemies, to do good to those who hate us, to pray for there's this call in our life as sons to be like our Father. He reigns on the just and the unjust. Well, that guy doesn't deserve that. Okay, well, neither do I. Hello, let's be honest, neither do I. But God blesses me. So is that the world we're going to step into? Well, I'll do good to you because you did good to me. Jesus said even the Pharisees do that. Nasty people do that. You're called to something much higher. You need to follow me, who came running into this world with forgiveness for you. When, to be honest with you, you did squat. All you did was what you shouldn't do, basically. But I come running in to forgive you, to take care of you. You're my kid. I love you. Follow me. Feed my sheep. Do you love me, Peter? Because you'll never be able to do it based on your own kind of love. You're only going to be able to do it as your love is put in the right place. That's how you follow me. And so the last P has to do with being perfected. And I've tried to give a key for each one. The first one was passion and prayer. Don't cling to the old. Run with the new. The second P had to do with peace, knowing peace by remaining. The key is to remain in a life of forgiveness. Easier said than done. The third P had to do with pursuing, which is operating by faith in order to know, not the other way around. And the key had to do, that's the whole thing, is by faith. But this fourth one, being perfected, we didn't read the verse, but let's read it. Verse 20. Danielle, you want to read verse 20? No, I'm interested to see what you're...
Peter turned around and saw behind them the disciple Jesus loved, the one who had leaned over to Jesus during supper and asked, "Lord, who will betray you?" Peter asked Jesus, "What about him, Lord?"
The scene is beautiful. Jesus is talking with Peter, giving him the keys to his life. And Peter literally, John goes by. He turns and looks. It literally says the Greek word has to do with reverting. Now, if you've ever reverted back to something, you'll understand what the word means, to revert back to something. Peter literally turns around, looks at John, and says, what about him? And it's a very nice rebuke. It's almost like Jesus would just mind your own business. It's none of your business what my will is for his life. And this hopefully will be helpful to all of us. You know how we really want to take God's will and can it, one size fits all. And then when all of a sudden something happens in Glory's life that doesn't fit mine, oh, God's will, God's will. And Jesus is point blank, listen, I've just told you my will for your life. It's none of your business what my will is for his life. That is a really nice way of saying you don't really understand my will, how it works out in different people's lives. It's not a one-size-fits-all, which is kind of clever. But the point for us, the key is focus. Stay focused. And it is so easy to get distracted. That was a good question, actually, when you think about it. John goes by, gee, you just prophesied over me. What about him, Lord? None of your business. He doesn't say that, exactly, but it is kind of like that. Stay focused on me. Focus, Peter, focus. Don't lose it, Peter. Okay. Is it 12:30? Yeah, just about. So, our fourth key is focus. It's the Hebrews 12, keep your eyes on Jesus kind of thing, the author and the finisher of our faith. So our 4 daily practices and keys: 1, passion for Jesus in prayer, don't cling to the old. 2, peace in all 3 spheres, whether it be with God, with other people, within ourselves, that we receive the peace, he breathed on him, receive the peace and release whatever's going to cause division. Walk in forgiveness all the time. The third is pursuing the way, the truth, and the life. That's the third P, by faith. Letting go of our old ways of understanding and knowing things to get a hold of the new. By faith, I believe I'm going to walk in that classroom and receive. You will. The fourth point is perfect, or being perfected by performing. Jesus sends us. He says, follow me. So we need to stay focused on the one that we're following. And that's a process every day. I like that idea of following me because it shows like emotion. You say, follow me. He's moving. And so we're moving. And so where does this end? Where it ends. It'll end where it ends. We're going where we're going. It's kind of, okay, Lord. So we get on with that. So, that's not bad. Thank you.